Well, last year, a group of government representatives, labor, academia and business initiated open conversations on a better South Africa. Through what they call Indlulamithi South Africa Scenarios 2030, they look for ways to create a socially integrated country where communities and institutions alike aspire to eradicate the social and economic inequalities. Now, the project is headed by the likes of political analyst Dr Somadoda Fikeni, the former statistician-general Pali Lehohla, and his co-participants such as unionist Zwelinzima Vavi. And to tell us more about the progress made since the launch, we're now joined by Xolelwa Kashe-Katiya, the spokesperson for the initiative. Xolelwa, very good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. For those who may not know what the mandate of Indlulamithi is, take us through what it is about and the inspiration behind the formation of such a noble initiative.
Indlulamithi is a scenarios building exercise wherein we try to imagine the types of futures that we could likely have as a country. So it's a process of trying to determine or come up with three different possibilities, which is the three scenarios that we launched last year in June. So I don't know if you know about the scenarios. We have Bourgeois, which is a bourgeois enclave nation. Yep. The second scenario being Naila, which is a nation that's in step with itself, and the last one being Gwara, which is just a state of lawlessness.
Explain, if you can, the symbolism of these scenarios.
First of all, we used dance moves to name the scenarios so that, you know, they're easy to remember. And also we try to make sure the naming resembles what happens within the scenario. Like I said, bourgeois. It's a bourgeois nation wherein there's divisions. You have the elite getting richer, and they're hiding behind the enclaves within security estates. However, the poor, just on the other side of those walls, are still trapped in deep poverty. We have an erosion of the middle class, wherein the middle class, as we know it right now, will either slip into poverty, into the poverty-stricken enclaves, or to a smaller extent, move up to the elite. So we see these divisions which are not sustainable, leading to fractures in a society across the board. So whether it's in the political space or in terms of the economy. So where we are right now, we do understand that we are the most unequal country in the world. But in Bourgeois, it will be even worse.
Yeah. Well, in his State of the Nation address last night, he spoke of inequalities, and he spoke of, he outlined some of the dreams that he have for this country, and he said that this is actually the South Africa that all South Africans wanted to see. But is it really? Is this a South Africa that South Africans wanted to see? And what are the common elements of a much broader vision of the country? Does it have to do with the people-centered state and economy?
Well, what I got from it is that when the president said when he was quoting his quote, there was saying, our future is better than our past. So I think he also acknowledges that we are not where we want to be. However, we are better than where we come from, and we're still trying to imagine a better future. In terms of the scenarios themselves, Naila Walk would be a scenario where we see citizenry being engaged, where we have different parts of our society participating. We have society co-creating in terms of imagining the future that we want to have. For example, when he speaks to imagining building a new city, it's not for government alone to build that city. There is business, there's labor, there's civil society, there's the churches, and so on. So what we're trying to inspire is a process of compacting, wherein different elements of society can commit to various things to ensure that we realize our dreams. And in
Indlulamithi, there's so many incredible brains in this initiative, and more people with different background and expertise have come together, have come on board to spark conversations, to get South Africans talking about certain issues. So which areas do you specifically look at for you to distinguish, or rather to put your research together?
Well, we're looking at all different facets of our society, but the point of departure was a question that we sought to answer. And the question was, to what extent is social cohesion attainable in South Africa by 2030?
Okay.
We aligned to 2030 because that's the horizon for the National Development Plan, but also for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So that was the point of departure. Where do we find each other as a nation? Because as much as we're talking about economic growth, our concerns about unemployment and so on, but what we found to be the common thread was that we are not as cohesive as we should be as a nation. We don't have a common vision, we don't have a common understanding of where we come from, and we don't even have a sense of nationhood. So that was what we decided to settle on, because as much as we're talking about the economy and everything else, we realized that we can never even attain economic growth without cohesion.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with our separation, our inequalities in all its different forms before we can even attain all these great ideals or the world that the president is trying to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you speak of a socially cohesive South Africa. So from the kind of conversations that you've been having, from the kind of research that you've gathered, so which are the areas that South Africa needs to work on in order to achieve a socially cohesive country?
Well, during the research, we came up with about 25 variables, which are the DNA, really, of the scenarios. But then we distilled those into 3 key driving forces. Now, the 3 key driving forces, the first one being social inequality, which is a major concern. I've already said that we are the most unequal country in the world. And when we talk about social inequality, the qualifier is social, because we don't want to just look at material inequality or income inequality. It's inequality in all its different forms, whether it's inequality in terms of access to facilities, access to services, gender inequality is in there, racial inequality, intergenerational inequalities. The second key driving force is capacity and leadership. And again, when we talk about leadership, we tend to think about the state. Okay. However, what we've realized from the research was that there's no capacity across the spectrum, whether it's in the big private sector companies or within our churches, within the labor movements. There's an issue of ethical leadership that seems to have eroded over the years. Yeah. The last key driving force is the issue of resentment and resistance. And that is coming very strongly from young people. And you've seen that with the Forest movement, wherein young people are seemingly very resentful. And when we try to unpack that, we realize that there's this intergenerational wound that we never attended to during the transition. And now it seems that we have passed on the baton, and you find that young people are more resentful, they are resisting, they're writing off the normal or what we accept as the traditional ways of engaging politically, or in terms of what all the initiatives that took place during the transition, the CODESAs, the process of writing the Constitution, all those things are being contested right now, and the noise is coming very strongly from young people. So in a nutshell, those are the 3 drivers. So what we need to be attending to is the inequality, its capacity and leadership, and also this notion of this wrangling over the Constitution or contested understanding of our history. I mean, you do see that in the public platforms wherein people have a different understanding of who is the rightful owner of the land and so on, and also what happened during apartheid, who was the victim, and also even in the post-apartheid moment, who is the victor and who struggled, who is the liberator, and so on. So these are the issues that we need to be attending to.
And these issue of racial polarization and racial profiling, do they not form part of the subjects under your discussion? Yes,
they do. And what we came up with is that we have this tendency to avoid these issues. We have these elephants in the room that we tend to tiptoe around. We even create language and terminology to engage with those. And it's becoming a South African culture to actually not name things. And race is one of those, wherein we don't want to deal with race in a pointed way. And as long as we carry on in that manner, we're still going to have more ruptures, especially around young people, because they don't have that culture of tiptoeing around issues. So the sooner we deal with those issues in an open manner, we will start realizing some results.
I mean, dealing with issues in an open manner is one thing, but then taking drastic action about some of the issues that have been tackled is another. Is there perhaps a plan of influencing the country's policymakers to take whatever has been deliberated upon to the country's decision makers?
But it would be difficult to deal with those when we don't even have a common understanding of what is wrong and what is acceptable and what is punishable. Because, I mean, you've seen in the past week as well where various public personalities have aired some sentiments on social media platforms. However, you can see how polarized we are in terms of how we approach those. There are those who are deemed to be correct, and there are those who are deemed to be on the wrong side of things. So I think the sooner we get to a common understanding of what it is that we're trying to build, what it is that is not acceptable by South Africans as a whole. And also we need to have those non-negotiables that we all agree on. At the moment, we do not agree on anything, including where we come from, including even who is the actual victim of racism. There's a study that was released, I think I just saw it yesterday, wherein the results came out saying actually the white population experiences racism more than the black population, which is actually quite controversial, and I'm interested in reading that study. So you can see that we don't even understand each other, and the sooner we get to, we find common ground.
We don't have much time, unfortunately.
Talking.
You have Indlulamithi Day later on tonight?
Yes, at 5 o'clock we are launching the results of the first year's results. So since the launch, where we are we in Gwaragwara, are we in Naila Walk, or are we in Isibujwa? All
right, Xolelwa, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
That was Xolelwa Kashe-Katiya, the spokesperson for the Indlulamithi South Africa Scenarios 2030, talking to us about the progress made since the launch of the initiative last year. And the second annual event will be held later on tonight. This is Morning Love. Let's take a quick break.